الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الناصح الأمين. اللهم صل على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين. ثم أما بعد. Alhamdulillah ala ni'mat al-Islam wa Sunnah. There are some characteristics that undoubtedly we have to avoid. There are some evil and nasty and disgusting and despicable characteristics that we have to avoid. And looking at some of these characteristics, inshallah ta'ala, this is going to be the topic of today's introductory discussion, bithnillahi ta'ala. Because we want to look at and reflect over a hadith that has been collected by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, but we want to take our time with it, bithnillahi ta'ala. So today will just be introductory, and then we'll go on to mention the other portions, bithnillahi ta'ala, of the hadith. This is a hadith that's an Abdullah bin Amr, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. It's on the authority of Abdullah bin Amr. Na'am. On the authority of Abdullah bin Amr. And as aforementioned, has been collected by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. So this hadith is a hadith that is mutafiqun alayh. And a hadith that is mutafiqun alayh, this is the strongest hadith as relates to its authenticity. This is the most authentic hadith, a hadith that has been agreed upon its authenticity by both Imams, Imam Muslim and Imam Al-Bukhari. So any hadith that Imam Al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim both agreed upon, this is the strongest category and level of hadith. Ala kulli hal, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, arba'un. There are 4 characteristics. Man kunna fihi kana munafiqan. There are 4 characteristics that if a person has these characteristics within them, then they are a complete hypocrite in action. They are a complete hypocrite in action. وَإِنْ كَانَتْ خَصْلَةٌ مِّنْهُنَّ فِيهِ كانت فيه خصلة من النفاق حتى يدعها. And whoever has a characteristic from these characteristics within them, then they have within them a characteristic of hypocrisy until they abandon it. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he goes on to enumerate what are these characteristics. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, number 1, إِذَا حَدَّثَ كَذَبَ. When they speak, they lie. So that's the first one. When they speak, they lie. Number 2, إِذَا وَعَدَ أَخْلَفَ. When they make a promise, they break it. When they make a promise, they don't fulfill the promise. They break the promise. That's number 2. Number 3, وَإِذَا خَاصَمَ فَجَرَ. And when they get into a quarrel, when they argue, they become belligerent, indignant, disrespectful, verbally abusive. Okay? So when they argue in the most horrendous and disrespectful of ways. This is what they do when they argue. وَعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Right. And then the 4th one is وَإِذَا عَاهَدَ غَدَرَ. And when they make an oath or they make a contract and the like, they break it. So when they make a contract, they break its terms. When they have any type of agreement, then they violate the agreement. Again, this hadith is narrated on the authority of Abdullah bin Amr and has been collected by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. The Fadilatul Shaykh Al-Allama, Shaykh Abdul Muhsin Al-Abad Al-Badr, hafidhullah ta'ala, he mentions the Muhaddith al-Madina. He mentions the premier scholar of hadith in Medina. He says, وَقَوْلُ, and his statement, أَرْبَعٌ مَنْ كُنَّ فِيهِ كَانَ مُنَافِقًا. And whoever, that there are 4 traits, there are 4 characteristics, that whoever has them, all 4 of them, contained in them, then they are a complete hypocrite in action. وَإِنْ كَانَتْ خصلة منهن فيه كانت فيه خصلة من النفاق حتى يدعها. And whoever has within them a characteristic from these characteristics, then they will have in them a characteristic of hypocrisy until they abandon it. The Shaykh, he mentions, he says, al-ma'na, the meaning of this, أن من وجد فيه هذه الخصال الأربع فهو موصوف بالنفاق العملي, that whoever has within them these characteristics, these 4 characteristics, then they will be categorized as a hypocrite. Now, then they'll be categorized as a hypocrite. The Shaykh goes on to mention that there, and this is a very important point that I want to point out, that they'll be categorized as a hypocrite in action. Now, that makes sense? That they'll be categorized as a hypocrite in action. Because hypocrisy and nifaq is of 2 types. You have nifaq al-amali and nifaq al-i'tiqadi. You have the nifaq of action, nifaq al-amali, and you have nifaq al-i'tiqadi. Then you have the nifaq, the hypocrisy of creed, of belief. The hypocrisy of, let's start with the latter. The hypocrisy of belief, of creed, this is what makes one a hypocrite. This is what makes one a hypocrite that will remove them from Islam, that will render their deeds null and void, and that will put them in the lowest portion of the hellfire. Now, this is that nifaq, that hypocrisy. These are individuals who they are the hypocrites, okay? Those who pretend to be Muslim, but they're not really Muslim. Those who act like they're Muslim, but they're not really Muslim. Those who disbelieve in Islam, but they pretend to be Muslims for whatever reason that they have, need to do such a thing. This is the one that will take you out of Islam. This person is not a Muslim. Then you have a nifaq al-i'tiqadi, al-nifaq al-amali, you have the nifaq of actions. The nifaq of actions, this is a person who acts like a hypocrite, but they are not a hypocrite, okay? This individual, they do not leave Islam. Their deeds are not rendered null and void, and they will not be in the lowest portion of the hellfire. But they have a nasty, despicable characteristic with them that's going to earn them a lot of sins, going to get them in some big trouble, but they're still a Muslim. And this is a very important point to make. So be careful and do not refer to individuals as being hypocrites, because the true hypocrite is a person who disbelieves in Islam in their heart, but they pretend to be Muslims. None of us would ever know who is a hypocrite because we cannot look into a person's heart. We cannot look into a person's heart. Okay, so we don't, and we should not go around calling people hypocrites. This is very dangerous, because to call them a hypocrite is tantamount of calling them a disbeliever. It's tantamount of saying about them that you act like you're a Muslim, but you're not really a Muslim. This is something that is very dangerous, and we have to avoid it, because none of us knows what is in the heart of someone else. None of us knows what is in the heart of someone else. We deal with individuals based upon their zahir, based upon what is apparent, what is internal. Allah Ta'ala, He will deal with them. Allah Ta'ala, He will judge them according to that. But as far as us, then we judge according to what we see. Now, it's not upon us to look inside a person's heart and to say anything about that. But it's upon us to deal with a person based upon what they present. If they present good, then we take them upon good. If they present other than that, then we adjust and we deal with them in light of what they present. Now, does that make sense? Okay. The Shaykh goes on, he says, وَمَنْ كَانَ عِنْدَهُ, and whoever has within them wahidatun minha, whoever has in them one of these characteristics, كانت فيه خصلة من النفاق حتى يدع هذه الخصلة, then they will have within them a characteristic from the characteristics of hypocrisy until they leave it, until they leave this alone. Now, so none of us should want to act like a hypocrite, period. None of us should want to act like a hypocrite. And we look at these characteristics, these are characteristics that are blameworthy. No one wants to have these characteristics. When they speak, they lie. When they make a promise, they break it. When they argue, they become abusive, verbally abusive, and so on and so forth. And then when they make a contract, they violate its terms. No one, those are all bad things, no doubt about it. Any characteristic that's from the characteristics of nifaq is a bad thing, okay? In any event, like I aforementioned, this is an introductory lesson, so we're not going to go over the whole of the hadith here, But inshallah ta'ala, we're just going to take a small portion of it and some benefits, some general benefits from the hadith. And the Shaykh, he mentions, he says, وَهَذَا مِنْ كَمَالِ بَيَانِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is a point, a very important point. This hadith is an example of the completion of how articulate the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam he was, and how clearly he conveyed information. Now, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was an example for us to mold ourselves after in every aspect of our lives. So when it comes to teaching, he was an excellent teacher and conveyor of information. He was an excellent teacher in teaching the Muslims. Very, very excellent. This is from the standpoint, a person will say, what part of the hadith do we extract that from? That he was an excellent teacher. The Shaykh, he mentions, he says, حَيْثُ يَذْكُرُ الْعَدَدْ أَوَّلًا. When he mentioned the number first, he didn't say, whoever, when they speak, they lie, right? When they make a promise, they break it, so on and so forth. He didn't mention it first and then say, whoever has these four, then he has within him, so on and so forth. No, he started with, there are four. There are four characteristics. That's how he started the hadith. This is an excellent way of beginning a hadith, an excellent way of beginning an address. Is that what? Is that you mention something like this first, and then you go on to expound. You mention something general first, and then you go on to expound and bring some more details. The Shaykh, he mentions, he says that he mentioned the number first. ثُمَّ يَأْتِي بِالتَّفْصِيلِ الْمَعْدُودِ. He mentioned the number first, and then he went on to bring the details and enumerate those items. This is excellent. Why? Because the Shaykh, he says, لِمَا فِي ذَلِكَ مِنْ الْحَفْزِ السَّامِعِ إِلَى الْإِسْتِعْدَادِ. He says, because of what it prepares the listener, and listener becomes ready, right? He becomes ready. It draws their attention. It draws their attention to what is about to be said. It makes them more attentive, because if a person were to start like this, there are four things. This is going to draw your attention, because now, what are these four things, right? And also, it's from the standpoint the Shaykh, he mentions, he says that it's not only does it draw a person's attention, but an individual يطالب نفسه بالمعدود فإذا فإن لم يطابق علم أنه فاته شيء. Okay, is that when you say there are four things, then the person is going to be paying very close attention and also counting as it goes, so that if he were to miss something, and at the end of the address he only got three things, then he knows, okay, I missed one. I missed one. You said there were four. I only wrote down three. I missed one. I only got three. I missed one. Right? So all of this shows the excellent teaching manner and style of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also, in addition to this, is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't teach the same way every time, but he would mix it up. He would mix it up, and this was always to keep things fresh, exciting, which is also very, very much needed to effectively convey information and to teach others. So all of these are lessons that we can learn from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we will be wise to imitate him in, as we will be wise to imitate him in everything. Because he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then verily he is our role model. He is our example of how we are to live our lives. In any event, the point here that we wanted to take were these very two important points. One was that nifaq is of two different types. Nifaq, hypocrisy, is of two different types. So everyone should be able to tell me and to break down what are these two different types. The first type is the nifaq, is the hypocrisy of actions. This type of hypocrisy, it does not remove a person from Islam. It does not render a person to be from the lowest portion of the hellfire, nor does it render all their deeds null and void. This is the nifaq of actions. In other words, you can say this is a person who acts like a hypocrite. This is a person who acts like a hypocrite. Okay? Then you have the nifaq al-i'tiqadi. Then you have the nifaq, the hypocrisy of creed, of belief. This is the hypocrisy that makes a person a hypocrite. This is what makes an individual a hypocrite. And that is that they disbelieve in Islam, but they act like and pretend to be Muslims. Now, this is the hypocrisy that will land a person in the lowest portion of the hellfire, that will render their deeds null and void, that will expel them from Islam. Okay? That will expel them from where? From Islam. And the other point was the excellent teaching style of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in that he mentioned the number first, and then he went on to give details and enumerate the 4 things that are the 4 evil characteristics that we all must avoid and stay away from. And then the Shaykh goes on to get into the first characteristic, that is that, and when they speak, they lie. And when they speak, they lie. But inshallah ta'ala, as aforementioned, we're going to get into that at another time, so we can take our time with it and really go into it, inshallah ta'ala, and speak about it in more depth and in detail. So we'll leave that into the next time. So until then, benefit from these other classes and playlists, as you see, that are there, inshallah ta'ala. And until the next time we meet, astaudi'ukum Allah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.